Opadnemvol to Uvegesh, and welcome to Shift+F1, a podcast about speedy race cars. That, by the way, is Hungarian for "Your dad wasn't a glassmaker."
Wow, that is...
Any guesses?
As from somebody who grew up in a town where the predominant manufacturing industry was in fact glassmaking, I am very interested as to what my many of my friends' fathers were not.
Yeah, you got that crystal. It means
I would just assume means you don't know shit.
It means, hey, you're blocking me, or you're blocking my view.
Oh, because you're not
very
glass.
good.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. You're blocking me. Something we might hear during qualifying this weekend. I'm Drew Scanlon. Joining me, Danny O'Dwyer. How are you, Danny?
Very well. Or the race. Hungaroring is a particularly, tight track, which was invented before Herman Tilke knew about straights. So it's a real go-kart track, and sometimes can be a bit of a profession. It's definitely a profession, but it could be a professional procession this coming weekend.
Rob Zachney, also here. How are you, Rob?
Melting in the heat.
Oh, boy.
There's a bad East Coast heat wave here. It's like 10 at night here, and it's still like 80 degrees in my office. It's not great. Not amazing hours here.
Wow, it's 5 a.m. here where I am, so we're all having. Hopefully, my hotel internet. I mean, it's already proven to be better than last week's, so that's pretty good. I'm in a digital country in the European Northeast, which where about half the population votes online. So wow. I'm thinking their internet's pretty good, and also it's like daytime and it's 5 o'clock in the morning right now. So my brain just kind of doesn't know what's going on. So let's talk about race cars.
Well, yeah, we appreciate you being here to chat race cars with us. And you as well, the listener. If you are new to the podcast, a very warm welcome to you. And if you are new to Formula One itself, we recommend listening to our preseason primer episode that assumes no prior F1 knowledge and explains how the sport works and who everybody is. So if you'd like to go back and listen to that, it's episode 257. Also, this show would not be possible without our audience over at patreon.com/shiftf1, where every month we release an ad-free version of the podcast along with bonus podcasts and videos exclusively for our patrons that cover racing documentaries and films, F1 video games, experiments with other racing series, and a lot of weird things. So if you would like to support the show and get access to all that fun stuff, head over to patreon.com/shiftf1 or click the link in the show notes. So what do we have going on this month, Danny?
Our review of Overtake, of course, has gone live, and we'll be reviewing the rest of the awesome anime series this month. So keep your ears peeled for that one, and eyes peeled, Media Pass patrons. And of course, a massive thanks to all of our incredible title sponsors. The first of which, Rob, I have been accidentally saying correct or incorrect for about 4 years.
Well, that's interesting, because you are correct as far as what this person intended their handle to be, but they never actually, they be due to character constraints. Get Rich, Oh Die Ryan, which we never said as anything other than Get Rich or Die Ryan. It's actually always been Oh Die Ryan. Always.
Oh, so wow, it's like, yeah, Get Rich. Oh, I see it now. I don't know what happened. Did my brain just fill in the blank?
But they did mean for it to be Get Rich or Die Ryan. They just ran out of characters, and that became their handle.
So we got there. Okay. I feel like Cyphus Training or Turf SES has a lot of characters in their name. I don't know. Maybe Patreon has changed their settings. Also, I feel like I've sort of become like a race traitor, like the O'Dye Ryans, you know what I mean? Like the O'Dwyers and the O'Dye Ryans in the past were great families, but or great clans that work together, you know?
You can be forgiven because there is no apostrophe. That would draw your eye too. Yeah.
Exactly. We need that. No apostrophe to draw my eye and ruin booking airline flights for the rest of this person's life. So massive thanks to Get Rich O'Dye Ryan. I'll say it now, I've ruined it. Agave ATX, Cyphus Training, Turf SES, at Team Blackjack, Michael Maves, Gordy's Army, at Talking Autos, Olivia Evans, TelemetryDeck.com, FTC, Drew Stewart, Bailey Foot, Abdullah Althani, Jason Chadwick, Abraham Getchell, The Space Above Us Podcast, Bunny Fiend, Snakes, Alex Goucher, Max Voltar, Circuit Demon, Troy Stammer, William Rumpf, Irvine Clinical Research, Lachlan the Maddened Man, Samurai Love Story, and of course Jason Kelly. Thank you all for supporting us. on this dense ass season. There's so many races. We're about halfway now, I guess. It always seems like the Hungaroring is it's the water break. Well, I guess the summer break is the water break, but Hungaroring feels like we're crossing the halfway threshold.
Yeah, and we have a what feels like a mercifully not light show, but I feel like we haven't done just a simple pre-show in a long time, and gotten some emails in. So we're going to do that this week along with the track walk. But first, some news. Danny, what's up with Ralf Schumacher?
Yeah, Ralf Schumacher made a post on Instagram essentially coming out as a gay man, which is something that does not happen very often in the world of motorsport. He's certainly not the first driver to do this, but he is, I would say, arguably the most high-profile driver to do this. Ralf Schumacher, of course, for those who don't know, is the brother of Michael Schumacher, the uncle of Mick Schumacher. He was in F1 for like a good decade. He had 6 wins, 27 podiums, career total points of just shy of 330. He raced for Jordan, he raced for Williams, and then a couple of rough years at the end with Toyota before he bowed out of the sport. And Ralf, I feel like maybe he's a bigger presence perhaps in German F1 or motorsport coverage. He doesn't seem to appear all that often on English speaking side of things, but he's still a media personality, in his home country. But yeah, on Instagram, him and his partner posted a picture, and I think it's something that doesn't happen very often and is worth mentioning. Especially, there's a reason why a lot of not just in motorsports but in sports writ large, people are less eager to come out in these male dominated sports. There have been some drivers. I did a little bit of research because I wanted to sort of get an idea of what historically was the case when it came to gay drivers and bi drivers within the history of motorsport. Mike Butler, who was a early 70s driver, came out. A lot of these were after they were racing. Leila Lombardi, she entered a bunch of races between 1974 and 76 and remains the only woman to have ever scored points in the championship. She was openly gay because she had a partner throughout most of that time as well. She was in a long-term relationship. Mario de Cabral, who was in 5 Formula 1 Grand Prix and died just a couple of years ago in 2020 at age 86, came out as bisexual when he was 75 years old. So again,
wow.
Sort of after the case. Hurley Haywood, she might be the most famous historical one. She won Le Mans. She also was gay, I think, for a time. It was known during her career as well. I can't quite remember. And then, of course, there are contemporary drivers. In W Series, for instance, Sarah Moore and Abby Eaton are also part of the Racing Pride Initiative, which is a sort of a new LGBTQ plus organization that's supposed to be out there talking about and normalizing a lot of this stuff. Jess Hawkins as well in W Series, Formula W I was about to call it. So yeah, it like lots of stuff, it's becoming more common to talk about, but it is still surprising how in 2024 this seems to be such a difficult thing in every sport. You know what I mean? Like and maybe there are some sports where it's less so, I don't know, but it seems to be every sport. I watch a lot of sports, and it seems to be the type of thing that people don't talk about, especially while they're in the sport and the public.
And I wonder if that's in particular a big part of it too, because I think I have no doubt that homophobia or suspicion that you don't know what sort of crypto homophobia is going to be around you at any moment. The difference between feeling truly safe to just come out in a professional setting versus thinking it'll be okay can be pretty large, right? The difference between coming out as a gay person, outside of sports, outside the public eye. But I also do wonder how much of it is also especially if you are a leading figure in a major international sport, boy, are you letting yourself in for a level of scrutiny that, performing at high levels hard enough. And I do suspect that it would be You'd have some really stern stuff to bear up to be like, well, now you're going to be a symbol as well. You're going to have to, you're going to be at the front of this, and like the scrutiny that comes with being a professional sport, a professional athlete is just going to be amplified now.
Yeah, being the tip of the spear first through the wall and all that sort of stuff. Like, I mean, talk to Lewis Hamilton and Bubba Wallace about what their experiences are like as drivers. I wonder if it's even more difficult in a way in motorsport where so much of, I mean, for the longest time, it was a very sort of bravado type sport. You know what I mean? You had to be like a hard person, have bravery to sit in the cockpit, and obviously with the sort of assumptions and stereotypes that surround gay people. And then also, even the driver market now, it's so vibes based. It's so like, you look at the, the Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda situation. That's one that keeps sort of irritating me a little bit, where Daniel seems to get chance after chance, and we really like him. He's a lovely guy, but he also is a lovely guy. He's very charismatic and handsome and all that. And then Yuki obviously is from a different culture and is perceived in a certain light and doesn't seem to be getting, he seems to be getting maybe less than credit and plaudits than perhaps a white counterpart might. You know what I mean? That's my own read on it anyway.
You raise a good point there too, though, where it's like, it is one thing for people you expect people of your generation, to maybe be more accepting, but like, there's been a lot of evil old bastards in F1.
Yes.
And that's true. That's true just across sports. Like, sports tend to be run and owned by evil old bastards. And so that is a very good point where, to a degree, there is also the, how do people with that set of prejudices and expectations who control your future, how will they interpret some aspect of your identity and use that to predict future performance? And I think it's undeniably happens when race is a concern. Sexuality seems like it would be another case where it would be something that is very easy to be an invisible black mark being held against drivers.
Yeah, well, congrats to Ralph. I also saw on his Instagram post his son David Schumacher posting notes of support, which is great to see. And I don't really have a transition to our next.
I want to see this transition. This is a real whiplash one. Go for it. Try it.
Haas is coming out as delinquent.
Nikita Mazepin, a name I really would love to stop saying. So he was a driver for Haas, sponsored by the Russian chemical company Uralkali that his dad owned. That's why he was a driver, because Haas needed the sponsorship money. When Russia invaded Ukraine, Haas dropped him and them as a sponsor, and Uralkali then sued Haas. A court, we covered this earlier, in Switzerland confirmed, and this is from an Autosport article, that Haas was within its right to terminate the sponsorship deal in the manner it did, and that there was no breach of contract. That meant no compensation was due to be paid to Uralkali for what happened. However, and this is where Uralkali has now come back, it was decided that Haas could only keep a portion of the $13 million sponsorship balance that had been paid to it for the season, and therefore they were ordered to give back the balance. It is believed to be that total is around $9 million. And Uralkali is now saying that has not been paid. Regretfully,
you left to my favorite part.
Sorry,
they
go
also
ahead, Rob.
owe the F1. They also own an F1 car.
Do they really?
They do.
Oh, you're right.
So there is a part of that contract was they also had to furnish an F1 car for, I don't know, like promotional purposes, or I don't know what the full deal was, but they needed to furnish Uralkali with an F1 car, which they have also not delivered. Now, as anyone who's backed Kickstarters knows, sometimes that's just a wrap. That's all she wrote. Like,
Yeah.
You expect these people to create, like, they don't really want to be part of this project anymore. Like, you're coming around and be like, when is my F1 car going to be fulfilled? Never. They
send in
might
all
even
the
want
Pepsi
to, but they
points.
feel super embarrassed about it.
Yeah, it is the article does point out it was a team race car from 2021, so it's not like they're using that a lot. I would wager. There is a quote here from the Euro Collie legal team. Let all current and potential Haas sponsors be aware of the kind of treatment that may await them.
Wow.
Just in case you're planning to invade a sovereign nation, I suppose, as a sponsor.
It's not like they didn't have some warning that there was, weirdness when it came to Haas and sponsors. They were coming in the turbulent wake of energy drink gate before them. So,
Yeah. Well, speaking of turbulence, Rob, what's this from Race Fans?
Yeah, it's just an interesting note from Max Verstappen talking about he's had sort of chronic vision problems since his crash at Silverstone, in 2021. In particular, he says, and this went to the Red Bull website, since my Silverstone crash, I've been struggling with vision problems, especially on bumpy tracks or those with many advertising boards along the track. The one thing that does occur, the one thing just the timing is interesting to me, is like, this is all subsequent to his wreck at Silverstone. But also then they introduced ground effect the next year. And everyone started talking about just being rattled around in the car a ton. But it does seem like a super distracting visual processing issue that has developed for him. I think I've heard some drivers talk about this as well with with the ground effect stuff, where just unable to pull focus when the bumps are violent enough. There's just limits to how much you can sort of process out the way you're being rattled around. And it sounds like just his baseline for visual processing, especially at high speed, has been a little tricky. But yeah, he says that it continued to crop up through the rest of the 2021 campaign, and has sort of been with him ever since, which is just interesting. It's the type of injury that we don't think about very much, but there's a lot of weird chronic shit that people can just end up stuck with, from a single injury incident, and it can just be sort of just altering your experience of being. It sounds like he got real unlucky with how that played out. Still, it doesn't seem to have slowed him down much. He says there's one race where it was really bad and he was not sure he could continue, but it's impressive that he's sort of driving through that.
Yeah. I mean, between hard impacts and I guess repeated softer impacts, but impacts nonetheless, such as would happen in porpoising. I saw an article recently about Navy SEALs getting similar, CTE-like injuries to their brains because of the, training with
the
weapons,
breaching charges,
firing a lot of bullets right next to their heads. So, yeah, I mean, I think, I think, Danny, you were covering a lot of the porpoising stuff, specifically around the medical stuff we were seeing back when that was a huge issue. So it's not like this stuff has gone away. And I think it's good that I didn't see this reported anywhere else. So good on Race Fans for calling attention to it.
Yeah, and he's not mentioned it. And this is kind of up until this point. I think it's really good that he has, because you will hear it's, not that dissimilar to the Ralf Schumacher story in some respect, is that a lot of these drivers don't talk about the injuries that they're carrying while they're driving. And I suspect there are lots of perception reasons why that's the case too. Like, we knew there are some which you just know about because it's impossible not to talk about it, like Robert Kubica, of course, with his hand problem. That there's no way of hiding that, but there are plenty of retired drivers who will talk about this type of thing. So it's really good that he's come out and said it. Like Rob was saying, that one, the shunt at Silverstone was a massive impact. It was,
yes,
we don't tend to get ones like that, and that was with a bunch of, there was a lot of distance to clear and gravel traps and everything else, but the deceleration he went under, and your eyes are literally connected to your brain. You know what I mean? Like, it's they're so delicate. And I remember when the initial porpoising stuff was going on, there was a lot of fear that this was doing damage that we might not know about for a few years, and a lot of people were suffering with. But obviously, he must have been suffering much, much worse, and never brought it up. And I think that's, in some ways, admirable that he didn't try and turn that into because for a time immediately after that crash, it was a very political crash. Like, Red Bull wanted to push it forward. Mercedes had their drivers doing simulations to prove that there was a clean line there. I still say that it was a genuine place to overtake in a season in which overtaking needed to be clutch for both those drivers and needed to be a little bit on the limit. But obviously you never want to see somebody crash out. But yeah, I think in one way it's admirable that he didn't bring that up and turn it into a political thing. But in another way, it is, it's sad that drivers perhaps feel like they can't talk about this sort of stuff. But I also understand the pragmatism behind it.
Well, I also wonder if there's maybe he's comfortable talking about it now because he's been cleared by whatever tests they could throw at him to see if he's good to continue doing this, that his performance is obviously rock solid. This is the sort of thing where, boy, if you aren't sure what's going on here, like, the most responsible thing probably is to have a full evaluation. And he probably did, but I'm not sure I would share that with the team. I'm not sure I would be super forward about, like, hey, I'm having trouble seeing when I'm driving my race car. That is the sort of thing where I think it would be real tough, because it is one of those things where it's like, now any routine thing that could happen in a race, someone would be like, well, is it because he couldn't see the track? And so I think it is, like, I easily imagine, even as, like, well situated as he is at Red Bull, it being a thing where it's like, do not want this in the air, do not want to be talking about this, about my readiness. And, maybe it's just easier to talk about now because it's gotten better managed, and he's a, multiple time world champion, and it's just on top of the world.
All right, well, next up, sprint races, Danny. Let's talk about them. 2025, what's going on?
Sprint races. We like sprint races. Sprint races, we weren't sure about sprint races at the start. There was some bad sprint races, but I think sprint races we've had good sprint races. I think sprint races have been fun this year, and sprint races will hopefully continue to be fun in the year of our Lord 2025. They have announced the sprint calendar. There's only one change from this year. Spa is returning to the sprint calendar. I think they had 2 previous years over the past 5. It's replacing Austria, which we just recently enjoyed, and I'm a little bit disappointed that it's replacing Austria, because I think Austria was a race that kind of needed the sprint race to, get a good race on it was a tale of 2 races, very much so, there. So it's a bit of a shame. So just like this year, we will have them at China on the 22nd of March, in Miami on the 3rd of May. Then we'll have Spa 26th of July, the US Grand Prix at COTA on October 18th, Sao Paulo on November 8th, and Qatar on the 29th of November at Losail, right near the end. And it is they haven't said exactly, but it's expected that the current layout used in 2024, where they have the sprint race on the Saturday prior to Grand Prix qualifying, is going to stay the same. That hasn't been announced yet, but it's suspected to be the case, which I think we all agree is a more fun way to organize the whole thing, instead of having sort of sprint day, as it were. It's so weird. Like, we've seen so many formats of this thing. It's becoming more part of the season, but it still feels like this sort of chintzy, sort of attempt to inject some flavor. It's like usually when you've had something like this, like a new, like KERS or DRS or some other aspect to the weekend, you're sort of used to it after 5 years. It feels like it's home. This still feels like an exchange student that might just disappear at any one time. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Go ahead, Rob.
Well, I'm still not sure. Like, everyone's just like just thirsty for more sprints. Like, this idea has now been trialed a lot. We've had good sprints, but it's still kind of, if the race is at all good, it immediately overshadows the sprint because like the stakes are much higher. It's more interesting.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of in this zone where it really it's very much like, stop trying to make fetch happen. Like, it's cool. Like, I'm happy for them to, throw a few sprints out there, like throw some curveballs, but it does feel like we're years into them being like, huh? Wouldn't it be cool if we had a reason to have everyone come out to the track 2 days in a row and, get more airtime? And it just hasn't really, even with F1 fans, it doesn't feel like it has broken through to be like, hell yeah, if there's more racing, give it to me. I mean, Drew was making odd little distress noises when Danny was saying that he thought the sprints have been pretty good. And I got the feeling there was a faintly dissenting opinion here.
I mean, yeah, I think this is the best incarnation of them. I think I don't need more than 6 of them in a season. And I do think that putting one at Spa is a good idea because according to my own chart, we have not had a good race at Spa for at least the past 3 years. So I wonder if a sprint race could provide some spicy action, even if we don't get a good actual race. So yeah, I don't know. It's fine. Sprints are fine.
It's the thing about the sprints, I guess, is that there is no universe in which every race weekend has them. It's just not like feasible. So
I think Liberty could make it happen. They would be like, you bastards did race.
Yeah.
Oh boy. I mean, yeah, F2 does, but like, I don't know. It seems like if that was the direction of travel, then we wouldn't have 6 this next year. We would have like 10. Like they seem very reluctant to, like, why are they taking races off the sprint weekend if they want the entire calendar to have them? Why wouldn't you just keep doing it at Austria? Yeah. It's literally that's a good example of one where, I think logistically it's probably one of the easier tracks to do a sprint race weekend on because it's a wholly owned track which has nothing else going on it and is owned by one of the teams. So, I wonder why. Maybe there's some aspect of the business to this where the locations that have the sprints are advertising that we have sprints. Like it's a sort of an exceptional thing to have. I don't know.
I wonder if this gets revisited after the new Concord agreement. Maybe it's just that everyone's keeping their powder dry for if you want us to race more. Yeah. Revenue splits are going to have to change. We're going to have to redistribute some of this pie. So that might just be they push the conversation as far as it can go. And to do any more of this, they're going to need a different agreement with teams.
That's a great point. Like them adding races to the season, I'm sure involves a lot of team negotiation stuff. And there's probably limits within the current agreements on that. And you're right. I bet there is something where like this is as many as they can get away with probably at the moment without having to change some paperwork somewhere. That's a good shout. Yeah.
All right, we are going to take a break real quick here, but we will come right back with Rob's IndyCar Minute, which I'm very excited about. Be right back. All right, Rob, hit me.
Hit me too.
IndyCar introduced hybrids.
Good stuff.
They're not good.
Oh no.
So,
oh no.
This was like, I think a year or so ago, IndyCar scrapped their plans to debut hybrids. Like, I think the initial plan was to do it last season. But their engine manufacturers were like, there's no way we can continue to service the existing engines and then build a new line of hybrid engines. It can't be done. So Finally, mid-season, oddly enough, they introduced hybrids. But the hybrids they're using they feel a little underwhelming. It doesn't feel like fully like hybrid engines like we have them in F1. We've had them for years. What IndyCar is running is something they're calling a super capacitor hybrid. Big ass capacitors.
That's what makes time travel possible.
Exactly. And when they hit 90, no. So
I'd love to see like 50 DeLoreans racing each other. Although the crashes would be very depressing.
So would John DeLorean, really. But so it kind of functions a bit like when we were calling it the KERS system, and you got like limited boost each time around. It kind of functions like that, where the capacitor charges up, and then you got a little kick of extra horsepower, and you go a little faster. But it makes the cars much heavier. So has that worked out? The road racing verdict is not fully in, though. The first race they did with it was a little bit. There were all sorts of issues, like you'd expect with them breaking in a new technology. But this past weekend they did. They always do a double header at the Iowa Speedway. They race on Saturday night and then Sunday afternoon.
Oh, a sprint
Iowa
weekend.
Speedway. Pardon?
A sprint weekend.
Yeah, pretty much. It's two 250 lap races. The circuit is less than a mile around, and so it is just chaos. It is just full field. Everyone's whipping around like the centrifuge. It's crazy, or at least it used to be crazy. Here is the stat that like IndyCar can't just like stand pat with this. Across a combined 500 laps, there was no on-pass track for the lead, while the opening race featured 100 overtakes for position and the second only 95. This compares to last year when, across the two races, there were a combined 698 passes.
Oh boy. Oh boy. It's like a third, less than a third. Jeez, that's rough.
Ed
And
Carpenter.
none for the lead.
The impetus for this was Autosport published a thing that Ed Carpenter, who ex-driver, I think, and also runs a team, just came out and said, "These hybrids are terrible. We need to get rid of them." He was like, and Autosport, their gloss on it was, okay, so nobody's actually wanted to say this publicly, but there's a lot of people up and down the grid who, especially with the ovals, have said the hybrids were going to kill the action because they're very heavy, right. And so they really offset any gain in power you get just by making the cars less nimble, less punchy.
Yeah.
Well, again, road courses, who knows? But Carpenter's position is like, we all know why IndyCar did it. Basically, they really want to have an engine they can say is a hybrid. But it's not really making the racing any better. And at the ovals, it's going to make it worse. That seems like a universal opinion now. And we kind of saw it this past weekend. Like, that Iowa Speedway is just always action-packed, chaotic, awesome. It was Alex Palou got out of the car and was like, said it was like the most boring race weekend of his life.
Oh, no.
So,
Oh, no.
The other thing is, like, it's kind of a neat system what IndyCar has. Like, the supercapacitor thing, it's neat. Like, it's a fairly easy, cost-effective way to take their existing engines and like, boop, it's a hybrid. But that also means it does feel like we're hybrid. It feels like the KERS thing because it feels so much like where F1 was 15 years ago at this point, like an eternity ago, when they were rolling this stuff out. And so it kind of in a way like highlights how far behind IndyCar is with technology, because like their solution to being like, we need a hybrid power unit is just put a couple big capacitors on it, call it a day. And it doesn't make the racing better, and the engine isn't significantly more powerful from that. It's just you just kind of put lead weights on the car. So I don't know. It seems like this is a thing that's backfiring horribly. We'll see how committed Indy is to it. But the ovals in particular, it seems this. The other thing that I was wondering is, I'm not even sure I can see how a hybrid system lends itself to ovals because there's not enough kinetic.
When do you brake?
Yeah. You brake a little, but like not. The whole point is you recover so much of the lost energy when you're like having major braking events. That's not oval racing.
I don't know.
Maybe they just stick like a dynamo on the wheel. You know what I mean? They're just like, you know, that little thing you put on your bike. You just go, you know what I mean? So it slows them all down a little bit. Yeah, I wonder what they're going to do because it seems like the type of thing that the Indy crowd could, you know, they're immediately, anything F1 sort of has, any time F1 has like tripped up, they're very quick to point it out, which is, I think, fair game. So yeah, I wonder if this is going to be, you know, I wonder how intent Indy is on going down this route as well, in particular. You know, it doesn't mean a lot to them. In a way, it seems out of brand, but, you know, F1 seems to be more progressive in that way. But, you know, I don't think people are screaming for Indy to do this as much as they are in F1, you know, or NASCAR or anything.
But are the brands, are the auto manufacturers? I guess
right,
is the real question.
Good point.
All right, well, watch this space, watch that space, you know, the Indy space. But in the meantime, Danny, take us to Hungary.
Oh, let's go on a journey, shall we, gentlemen? Pack your bags and head to the beautiful nation of Hungary. I've never been to Hungary. Have any of you guys been to Hungary?
I have, yes. I've been to Budapest.
Oh, there you go. Yeah,
It's
I never
gorgeous.
did. Budapest, Prague, Vienna, all the nice ones. Never been to any of them. I've been to. Hey, look, but I'm enjoying Tallinn right now. So,
right.
You know, which is the Budapest of the North. That's what I'm calling it.
Okay.
We're here again. We have been here since the same year that I was born, 1986. It was the first Grand Prix to be held behind the Iron Curtain, which was a very large real curtain that the Soviets built around much of Europe that stopped air travel, blocked the sun for a number of extra hours during the day.
I always learned so much from your track walks.
Yes, yeah. The Irish public education system was, you know, hit or miss.
Who can forget Reagan saying, "Mr. Gorbachev, it's opening night," and then the curtain opened, and we saw what was going on.
Well, yeah, exactly. We saw all their misdeeds. Yeah, Bernie Ecclestone was very proud of this, of course, and the first race was we had an inch. I'll talk about actually the first race later, but it was the Battle of the Brazilians, they called it. See if you can figure out who the two Brazilians were before I get to that part. It's changed a little over the years. It's 70 laps, 4.4 kilometers, about 2.7 miles. It's about 20 kilometers outside of Budapest, so apparently it's a pretty good one to attend, and it is well attended. It's always been well attended. Apparently really popular with Finns. I don't know why, and I've never known this, but I read it on two different articles. So either somebody lied and somebody else copied their work, or for some reason the Finns really like to go down to Hungary. Maybe it's nice and warm. Maybe they like the shorter days during the summer. I don't know. But because of the nature of the track, it always had a bit of a precession problem. It's got some straights, but they're very short, and most of the track is lining up for a turn, if not actively turning. In 2003, they had some changes to the track. They extended the start-finish straight to try and encourage some overtaking, although it remains one of the shortest on the calendar. And the first turn was made tighter so that you could more easily sort of stick your nose in, get an overtake done, and then have the next turn, which is largely the case now. Like, there is some battling that goes on between turns 1 and 2, but for the most part, if you get one done properly, you sort of have it. And turn 12, which is, you know, the third last turn on the track, you might remember it. It's basically just a right-hander that used to have a sort of a high-speed chicane on it. But they, again, straightened that one out and put in a sort of a tight turn to try and increase overtaking. It's usually a dry race. It took 20 years for them to have a wet one, and they don't happen all that often, although I do have some memories of recent ones being a bit wet and being interesting. The teams sort of go for Monaco levels of downforce here because the straights are so short. So it's super aero over horsepower. It also gets really hot here as well. And also apparently the track gets very dusty because it's not used much at all except for Formula One. So sort of the narrow Herman Tilke early design, the fact that it's quite twisty, and then the fact that there's not massive levels of grip lends to it being a tricky place to overtake. We have had some memorable moments though. The Battle of the Brazilians in 1986, of course, that was Nelson Piquet beating Ayrton Senna. This is also where Mansell won one of his titles in 1992. He won 8 of the first 10 races and then got second here at the Hungaroring, which was enough for him to win the championship on the 11th race of the season. It was his 176th Grand Prix start, making him the most experienced first-time champion in history, which I did not know.
Wow.
Who knows? Maybe Nico Hülkenberg will be able to beat him in the next few years. In 2003, there was a really nasty crash. It's one of those ones that was in montages of dodgy F1 crashes. Ralf Furman, who was an Irish driver, actually, technically. He was born in England, but he raced under the Irish flag. I think his mother was Irish, and he had an Irish driver's license as well. He had a really nasty crash racing for Jordan. He got knocked unconscious. It's very not nice to look at. Really heavy shunt. It sort of reminds me a little bit about Max's Silverstone shunt. But the way it happened was the rear wing fell off the car. It's a crazy crash. Yeah, it's between turns, is it 4 and 5? Yeah, no, 3 and 4. So they come up the hill. Turn 3, they're kind of coming up the hill, and there's a fast speed left-hander. I'm not sure if he knew his rear wing came off, but basically the minute he instigated the turn, the car just went nope, and then he pirouetted and flew into a tire barrier. He was knocked unconscious, and Zsolt Baumgartner, who apparently was local, he was a Hungarian guy who was their third driver, filled in. So rather appropriate in a way. I'm not saying that he loosened some screws on the rear wing so he could race at his home race, but just saying, if I was a Hollywood director, I'd probably write that into the script. This is also where Take Inoue was hit by the medical car in 1995. Another piece of classic Formula One stock footage. Poor Take Inoue did hurt his leg, but was able to race the next race, so thankfully it wasn't too bad. Alonso had a bad race here in 2006 as well, lost a wheel because a wheel nut wasn't properly put on, which was what allowed Button to get his first ever victory in 2006, and it was also Honda's first as a team writ large. Hamilton also made history here with the first hybrid win in 2009 in the KERS era that Rob was wistfully talking about. And not to be, not to have any more incidents that involve either Alonso having a wheel nut taken off and other people having nasty crashes. Felipe Massa combined both of these in 2009 with his the incident where Ruben Barrichello ahead of him lost a spring, which bounced along the track, and then Massa collected it, knocking him instantly unconscious, and where he drove basically straight into a tire wall. Having already been knocked unconscious. Apparently it was the equivalent of being hit by a bag of sugar traveling 150 miles an hour, 240 kph. That's a lot. Anyone who's seen the size of the screw and the size of the hole in Barrichello's helmet, and the hole that he had on the side of his head, which thankfully wasn't too big, knows all about that. Yeah, so Hungaroring's been, a lot of incidents have happened there. I've always liked it. I think the reason I do is it's one of the most fun ones to drive in the game. It's very demanding. It's got lots of interesting corners. It always feels like a fun one to zip around on. Most of the battling takes place in the first sector, I will say. This is not, Sector 3 basically is barely a sector and nothing ever really happens in it. Bit of a procession as they sort of get ready for the next lap. And Sector 2 is largely too difficult to overtake in because it's so twisty-turny. So really, if you don't get the job done before turn 4, you're kind of out of luck here. So a lot of early lap action.
Okay. Well, this just in 2 hours ago from Hungaromet.
Ooh.
Excessive heat warning.
Oh boy.
Qualifying, close your ears, Rob. Qualifying day looks to be 87 degrees Fahrenheit or 31 Celsius. Thankfully, humidity only 38%. Precipitation 0. Wind, we're looking at like 8 miles an hour or 13 kilometers an hour. So maybe not enough to blow away the dust. Even less on race day, 6 miles an hour or 10 kilometers an hour. Also, no chance of precipitation. And the heat climbing slightly to 31 Celsius or 90 degrees Fahrenheit. So, gonna be, man, it's a hot one.
Sweaty Hungarian summer.
Yeah. And as we head into Hungary, the driver standings look like this. Max Verstappen is on top with 255 points. Lando Norris in second with 171. Charles Leclerc is in third with 150. Carlos Sainz in fourth with 146. Oscar Piastri fifth with 124. Then we've got Sergio Perez with 118. George Russell with 111. Lewis Hamilton with 110, 1 point behind his teammate with that win last week. Alonso's got 45, and Lance Stroll's in 10th place with 23. Hulkenberg's got 22. Hulkenberg's 22 points in a Haas. That's, wow. Tsunoda in his RB with 20 points. Ricciardo just behind, nearly half as many, or almost half as many with 11. Oliver Behrman still holding strong in 14th place with 6 points, as has Pierre Gasly. Kevin Magnussen's in 16th with 5. Alex Albon has 4. Esteban Ocon has 3. And then Zhou Guanyu, Logan Sargent, and Valtteri Bottas with 21 points.
Fantasy?
In the constructor standings, sorry, I lost my mouse there for a second.
Wow.
Red Bull Racing is on top of the constructors with 373 points. Ferrari has 302. McLaren has 295. Wow, okay, only 7 points separate them from Ferrari. Mercedes is in fourth with 221. Aston Martin's in fifth with 68. RB has 31. Gene Haas and team have 27 points. Alpine's got 9. Williams has 4. And Sauber has 0. If you would like to join the standings yourself, you can do so using the link in the show notes to our official Shift+F1 F1 Fantasy League. Can give us do your worst pun and make a team. You can also hit us up on the emails, shiftf1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. Rob, you want to kick things off here?
Sure. Paul writes, "Hi, Drew, Danny, and Rob. I just finished reading the book The Formula by Joshua Robinson and Jonathan Clegg. Great read. They get amazing access for their interviews right up to Bernie himself. Covers the whole history of the sport with all the bumps and bruises along the way. Just wondering if you consider reviewing books like these for the Patreon podcast. Could make an interesting break from the usual films and TV shows. Keep up the great work, Paul from Down Under." So, the book and the Patreon podcast, a recipe for sorted outcomes in my experience. Like, if the problem is, like, people would be like, hey, got 2 hours, watch this thing, we'll talk about it, all good. Book a bit requires a bit more.
Book long. Long, Rob. Book long.
And you can be like, well, what about audiobooks? That's true, but nevertheless, we're still talking about like a more significant commitment of time. And the issue is that it's real easy for one person to be like, I did my reading, I did the homework, ready to go. And then everyone else is like, well, I can fake my way through this podcast, sure. So it's tricky. I'm not opposed to it. There's been a lot of good books written about F1 over the years, but I just think logistically, there's reasons I think that we have not been like, hey guys, let's put movies on hiatus and do a book.
Yeah.
I mean, it's sorry, go on, Drew.
Oh, I was just gonna say it. At that point, you are talking about monopolizing all of your free time to get a Patreon episode out. We did this once exactly one time at Giant Bomb for a podcast.
Oh, really?
Called Bomb After Reading. Yes, there was one episode We
Wow.
read
You
the
should have
the
done
book?
Ulysses. I don't know what you're thinking.
we read the book and then watched the movie of Michael Crichton's Sphere. And it was
wow.
pretty fun.
That's
but
incredible.
it did take a lot of time.
Yeah. And Sphere is a page turner.
Oh yeah. I should also mention I'm like maybe a third of the way through this book that Paul talks about, the formula, and it is well written. And I think, especially for someone who is maybe new to the sport in the last few years, it really gives a great bedrock of Formula One history, all the stories that keep getting referenced by like commentators and boobs like us. It's a great way to just ingest a lot of F1 history and give yourself a good foundation. Other books that I've read and liked, How to Build a Car by Adrian Newey and Life in the Fast Lane by Steve Matchett.
I think also that's a really good way of like recommending it. Like I would encourage people to email in recommendations and like, short reviews themselves that we'd be able to pass on to other folks. I think the other thing about the Patreon content is that a lot of the folks who watch those, we hear from them that they like an excuse to go watch a movie. And I think it's easier for them to jump on a movie, sacrifice 2 hours of their time one night to watch a movie that they may not have watched because they are interested in having their own thoughts and opinions before we dive into the deep end. I think if the three of us were like, if this was our full-time job, if we didn't also have, full-time jobs that take up a lot of time, I'm here in Estonia, doing work at 4 a.m, waking up to do podcasts, and I love this podcast, and it's a privilege to do it. And we were going to record the Patreon pod this week, but I asked to do it next week when I'm back in the US. Like we work as hard as we can, I think, on this stuff, but sometimes there's, we gotta. And the seasons have only gotten longer, so I think sometimes it's just a little bit too much of a stretch. I'd love to be able to do it, but like Rob said, it's a big commitment of time. I'm also a really bad reader. I read like maybe a book every year or two or something. I think like my brain just don't like.
I used to be a good.
Can't do it.
I used to be like I read a lot, and now that it feels like a muscle that's completely atrophied. But I do think like there's a lot of Danny, you and I are juggling a lot of projects at all times, in particular, and then you've got a kid, and so like whatever little scraps of sanity and free time you had, like went.
I miss bedtime one day a week because of the show, right? And I don't miss bedtime for anything, like. But when I'm putting my daughter down, and my wife knows that she's listening for the Nyum or the Race Around the World, she can hear me do that. She doesn't hear anything else. And if the Race Around the World is late enough that she knows my daughter's still awake, she'll tell me go in. She's still awake. So we all, and like everyone knows this, right? Everyone for their work has to sacrifice every once in a while. But yeah, you don't want me in a book club, man. Nobody wants that. I'm gonna turn up with someone else's fucking homework.
All right, should I take this next one, Rob?
Yes, please.
All right, Zachary writes. Yes, long one here, so buckle up. Zachary writes, with Rob talking about the tour, meaning the Tour de France, I wanted to write in and talk about an event I used to do in the Twin Cities called the Powderhorn 24. Powderhorn24.com.
Wow.
Unfortunately, the event is no more, a victim of COVID, and then no one wanting to pick it back up and run with it. But in its day, it was a 24-hour-long cycling race on city streets in South Minneapolis. Teams were anywhere from 1 to 7 riders on a 5-mile course with 4 checkpoints that you had to hit to get a lap registered. At the end of 24 hours, we saw who had the most laps completed. You'd camp on the side of the Greenway, an old railroad bed turned into a cycling trail through the heart of the city, but any food, supplies, repairs, etc. had to be done by the team.
Wow.
You were also required to complete shifts as volunteer workers on the course. They do events in the community as well, where you'd get a bonus lap for checking out a shop, for example, or viewing a landmark. But generally, the payoff wasn't worth the time loss if you cared, because while it was billed as a non-competitive ride for 10% of the for 10% or so of the teams there, it was incredibly competitive. My team started as 3 riders, all of us just amateur cyclists. There were several 7-rider sponsored club teams who did riding. I was the endurance specialist. I do a lot of 100 to 500 mile rides.
Oh my God.
I've done one 100 mile ride in my life on completely flat terrain and wanted to die. We had an all-rounder / expert mechanic and a bike messenger who had incredible speed for about 4 laps and was completely fearless. Important to note, the course is not closed for us. It is active city roads.
Oh my God.
After our first year, we recruited a 4th member. All of us could repair bikes, and we were avid campers. I used to drive actual race cars semi-professionally, and at some point, the team got together after our first year and said, quote, "If we want to run with the top teams, what do we do?" This is going to sound like it was out of a movie, but I said, we just don't have the team size or sponsor support to go head-to-head on raw speed, but we can find other advantages.
Oh, man.
In most racing,
Moneyball.
the winning team is the one who works in the gray areas, after all. And so we spent 3 months prepping, working specifically on hill climbing to take advantage of the course layout and conditioning, practicing the course to find shortcuts since all you had to do was be at the 4 checkpoints to get a lap. So we could shave off 0.3 of a mile, for example, by cutting down some side streets. We figured out the optimal rider swap location and worked on a system where, using an F1 style pit board, we'd call in the rider and then have the next rider at speed on the straight so they could hand off the lap counter card without having to stop. Oh my! It's like a baton.
Yeah, that's amazing.
This is a thing every other team started doing the next year. And we brought in my old crew chief / strategist, my dad, who used his lap counter spreadsheet to track us and the other top teams using the timing and scoring on the website. We'd then sync up trip computers on the bikes so we knew the lap times we had to hit to gain.
Wow.
Focusing on hitting fast laps at night when it was cooler out and we could ride harder while the other teams were relaxing. This was made easier by me and one other rider volunteering to spend about 2 weeks prior adjusting our sleep schedule to optimize our energy for night riding.
This needs to be a movie. This is crazy.
What did all this mean? We went from 7th to 2nd place, and we're the only team below 7 riders in the top 5, having only 4. Unfortunately, the next year, everyone caught on to a lot of our stuff and started doing it, so our advantage was lost. But for that one glorious year, we really felt like world beaters. Anyway, I could probably write a small book on my team doing that race, but this email is already way too long. I just thought it would maybe be an interesting read for the group. Happy tour. That's awesome. Thank you, Zachary.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's the stuff of legends.
It sounds
so they were in 2nd place, 4 riders.
Yeah.
And the people who did it first had 3 more people they could swap in.
That's crazy.
To rotate through. That is nuts. That is a moral victory. Now, I do wonder, I am curious. Do you think people felt like these folks poisoned the powder horn a little bit? Where it's like, do you remember the days before these assholes came and fucked it all up and turned it into the sweatiest race you've ever seen?
I mean, Zachary does say that, it's a non-competitive
10%.
ride, except for, the people who take it incredibly seriously.
It sounds like a lot of people took it seriously, though.
Well, yeah.
It sounds awesome, though.
I can't believe they did it during, with the ride. There was the first question I was going to have was, did they manage? Because, surely the cost of putting on an event to close the roads would have been nuts. So was it like a gonzo event? I guess they had some local backing, right?
No,
because they had all the.
I mean, a lot of organized cycling events don't close the roads.
Okay, that is That is insanely cool. I think my
I don't know
favorite
how
part,
busy South Minneapolis is. I don't know what that, you know what I mean? Like maybe there's a
Right.
lot of like sleepier streets that they were able to cut around through, but like, yeah, that sounds bonkers.
I love the idea of cutting down the side streets and figuring out like alternative routes that were still legal. That sounds absolutely.
Yeah.
And just it's funny as well that they had like you can see the characters in the movie version of this where it's like
Oh, yeah.
the Deliveroo guy or whatever, you know what I mean? Like who's able to like his or their skill was the ability to like, you know, duck and weave between cars or whatever, and the endurance cyclist.
In my head, this is like if the cast of The League got fit on bikes and decided to get super serious into this. It's great.
Yeah,
Real,
they should have. You know, that era with like, you know, dodgeball and, you know,
oh yeah,
what was the blade? I was about to say Blazing Saddles, but I meant
Blades of
what's
Glory.
The Blades of Glory. There we go. Yeah, there was a missed opportunity to do this one. You know, get the local gym's money back by winning the what's it called again? What's the name of the race? It's got the powder horn. What?
24.
What's powder horn
24.
about?
I don't know.
The only powder horn I know
horn.
about is like the thing you keep
Yeah.
gunpowder in.
If you're like I was gonna say
old-timey.
like a medical thing you take so that your penis works better.
No, not where I was going with that. No.
Okay, I'll take this next one. This comes in from Seva. Seva writes, for context, I was brought back to F1 since the Drive to Survive series started, having also watched a bit as a kid in the late 90s and early 2000s. It has been fun to go back to some of those seasons with F1 TV, a feature I highly recommend to people. The only thing I don't quite remember being a major issue in those days is the seemingly pervasive failed upgrade. Just in the last few races, Stroll said that all of Aston Martin's upgrades have been useless for the past 12 months. Danny Rick was questioning the recent Sauber upgrades, and well, there's Ferrari. With more tools, money, engineers, wind tunnels, simulations, etc., I would have thought teams would be stumbling less, not seemingly more than before. What's up with that? Or am I misremembering things? Love the podcast, Seva. This is an interesting one. I hadn't considered that that's the case. To me, I feel like maybe Rob has good insight on this one. I feel like this might have a lot to do with not just the amount of technology that's in the car, but the type of cars that are running these days. That, you know, obviously there's a lot of more complex stuff when it comes to the engines themselves. There's just more in the cars. There's more, what would you call them? Individualized systems that have to go in it. But also the aero profile of these cars is so much more about the detail than it used to be. You know, you go back to the 70s and 80s and you're seeing these crazy wings that are getting stuck on the backs of the cars. It's not exactly subtle. Obviously the 90s and aughts were not that crazy, but the types of changes and upgrades they were bringing, I suspect, were less, you know, I don't know, specific, or were less about, you know, we've sort of, it's been one long technological push, so it makes sense that at the moment we're in this sort of, you know, tip of the spear where they're shaving off microseconds instead of seconds.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good theory for why that is. Like, it's enormously complicated in a way it didn't used to be. Like, to your point, Danny, we talk about like the aero revolutions, the 70s and 80s. You know, it was cutting edge shit to like put a wing in a wind tunnel and see what happens,
right? And
you know, run it. You know, run a few cycles with it and really get an idea of how the air is actually going to flow. That's table stakes now, and every single part of the car is now an aero element. That just like that changes everything. It used to be it was like there's two wings on the car. They do stuff mostly related to just like where you're putting downforce on and cornering, but like beyond that, the car was like a, you know, it wasn't such, not every surface needed to be contoured to like play a part in the in the aero profile of the car. I think also the ground this new ground effect era that's related to this point of how it's all gotten more complicated. But who was it? I think it was James Allison talking about like why did Mercedes get it so wrong for a couple of years, and he was talking about we had a system for upgrades and car design that we were really happy with. It worked for 8 years. With the ground effect here, it stopped working, and we were really slow to react to it. That effectively what they had was they had two little departments. I think it was like chassis and like chassis and aero, and then there's a track engineering team or something. And those three departments, like one team spoke to both teams, but the two teams were siloed, and that they built a championship winning car. That car dominated for like 8 years, and then it just stopped working because you needed to have those teams much more closely integrated and like talking about what they were going to be doing to each other, and so it kind of fell apart. I think, ironically, something that might gesture at some of the complexity of this is the F1 Manager game, which I'm not the biggest fan of. I don't think they're a little dry. But their upgrade system, I think, does give you a little taste of how annoying developing an F1 car might be. Because every upgrade you propose, you get this like series of variables you're tweaking. High speed corner performance, low speed, middle speed corner performance, then the straight line speed. And as you're trying to figure out these upgrades, pushing along one axis begins to diminish performance in other parts of the car.
Yes. Yeah.
And it is really easy when you're playing this game to be like, ooh, well, this part started this aspect of performance is starting getting worse. We need to address that. And start developing to cancel out your fucking upgrades.
Yeah.
It's real easy. And like I'm sure that is a real simplified abstraction in that game to depict what's going on. But I actually think it's kind of a clever way to sort of represent, hey, like, if you are just trying to like perfectly balance your car, that might be at odds with leveraging what you're actually good at. And so it is. It's gotten way harder than just build a faster car and eke out more performance, because what type of performance you're eking out really matters, and that requires some major choices at a high level of the team.
All right, you want to take this last one, Rob?
Yeah, I had missed that this had happened. Hey, lads, love the podcast and appreciate your unique takes on one of my favorite sports. Did any of you see the absolute wizardry that was on display from McLaren's side pod sponsor? In a post in the F1 technical subreddit, you can see from Lando's onboard that during a lap, the side pod sponsor changed from DP World, to Smart Logistics. Apparently, they use e-ink like the ones you get in a Kindle. But I just thought this was a wild thing to see on an F1 car.
I'll put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? It's the black part of the car, so it's like a white logo, and it flashes from. DP World is one of my favorite named companies because I think the DP stands for Dubai Ports. I think it's the Dubai Port Authority, and obviously in Dubai they're just not down on some of porn's more interesting subcategories. It just didn't nobody at the board meeting mentioned it. But yeah, it just swaps over to Smart Logistics. Like,
it looks pretty good too. Like,
yeah, it looks sharp.
There's the frame where you see the transition, and it's like, oh, that's obvious. But once the two logos are displayed, it really doesn't pop at all as like a weird display.
It's very. It's cool.
Weird that
it's not AR. Yeah.
There is a note in the comments of this post pointing to, and I thought I remembered this, an article on motorsport.com from 2022. Showing that McLaren was going to run these at that weekend's U.S. Grand Prix. So I remembered that they were doing this, but just like this emailer, I hadn't noticed it, I think, until the most recent race. So either they didn't use them from then on, or like we're doing it only sporadically, or for some reason we all just noticed it at the same time. I'm also curious, really, this is lighter than a sticker?
Right.
Or you're
that's a good point.
by cycling through multiple sponsors, you're getting more money out of it, and therefore that makes it worth the weight on the car to you? It's amazing.
It's just like Rob was saying about the upgrades, you know. It's like more money comes in, but you know, a little bit heavier. We're sacrificing that for this. Yeah, it's funny. Like a Kindle is incredibly light, but like you said, like we're in a sport where, you know, the drivers, you know, make sure they have some nice bathroom visits before they get in the car, just in case that extra weight, you know, shaves off 1,000th of a second. It does seem like a lot. Yeah, it's interesting. It also it's another example of, I guess, them using black works for this on the cars too. I wonder if it's the harder to do this stuff if you're not using black or white.
Yeah, I mean, well, I think as someone who's been in the e-ink mines lately, it's tough. Like the state of that art still is tough to make pop and look vivid, so it kind of only works with a black backdrop. But Drew, that was my thought too. Is like the weight involved. It would crack me up if McLaren had been coming on like a house on fire with their technical developments, building this awesome car, and Zach Brown is like, "You need to reserve a few more grams for my ad tech." You know.
Also, what about wattage? Because like I know e-ink is the way it displays is like, yeah, but like I don't know. I feel like when the aperture that they're running these cars, I guess it's daylight, but in my head I'm like, it probably is more powerful than like a Kindle. In it has to be able to, maybe the thickness of the logo.
No, because it's not really illuminating. So that's the thing, is like if there's no, like, the thing that kills an e-ink tablet is when you have to like run the front light illumination to throw light onto the e-ink page. If you don't have to do that, it sips power. It only draws power to make the transition, but it's not like holding the image is really drawing a significant amount of power. So from the standpoint of like what is just the power usage of an F1 car running ambiently, I suspect it's probably free. And I bet you that is why. Because if I remember that article we read a year or two ago about their proposal for display technology, I think it was LED. And it wouldn't surprise me if the reason they went away from LED was that the power draw and the weight was prohibitive in a way that e-ink was not.
All right, well, you can send us your Kindle recommendations for e-ink readers or books to read on them. Shift+F1podcast@gmail.com or f1.cool/emails. You can also hit us up in the socials. There's a link in the show notes. And that's us around the internet. Should we take it around the world, Danny?
Let's race around the world. Yeah, that's for all my homies on the 6th floor.
Yeah. You are racing around the world this weekend, just like the World Rally Championship. They're in, what is that character? Liepāja, Latvia, for the TET Rally Latvia. The Craftsman trucks are at the Indianapolis Raceway in Indianapolis, Indiana, for the T-Sport 200. The World Superbike Championship is in Czechia at maybe my new favorite motorsport venue name.
Move over,
Autodrome Most.
Oh yes, I love Most. It is the most. Stick an eye in there as well. It could be moist. That'd be nice.
It's true. Formula E is in London for their 2 E-Prix this weekend.
Are they still doing that down in where was it they used to do it? Down around
Battersea?
Around Battersea, wasn't it? Yeah.
This says the Royal Docks, Excel London.
Oh, so that's over by Canary Wharf. That's where they do the MCM Expo. You're right. They have changed it to there. I remember, because it drives inside the building for a bit. Remember this?
Oh, wow. All right.
Yeah.
Wow. Formula 2 and Formula 3 will be supporting Formula 1 at the Hungaroring this weekend. The NASCAR Xfinity Series.
We almost went an entire podcast without saying Ermagerd Hungaroring.
NASCAR Xfinity Series, it's also at the the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in Speedway, Indiana, for the Pennzoil 250.
What's up with your accent, Drew? We're talking
That's
about NASCAR.
I'm talking about the Xfinity series.
Oh, sorry, Xfinity.
They ain't cup cars.
The Repco Supercars are in Sydney Motorsport Park for the Bow Repairs Sydney Super Sprint and Super Night Race.
Whoa. Bow repairs, bow problems.
Motocross Grand Prix is also in Czechia, in Loket, for the Motocross Grand Prix of the Czech Republic. What else we got?
Czechia.
IndyCar. Boy, a lot of stuff going on here in Toronto.
Yeehaw.
Toronto!
Nothing more American. Toronto, yeah.
For the Honda Indy Toronto. The NHRA is in Kent, Washington. Washington's WA, right? That's Washington?
Yeah.
At the Pacific Raceways for the NHRA Northwest Nationals. Super Formula is at the Fuji Speedway in the foothills of Mount Fuji in Oyama,
Beautiful.
Sunto District, Shizuoka Prefecture.
Terrific. Oh,
And we got NASCAR.
NASCAR.
Also at the hallowed grounds of Speedway, Indiana for the Brickyard 400.
Check out our... what was the name of the movie we did with the Logan Lucky? Logan Lucky. Wasn't that Indiana? Wasn't that Indiana? What a great movie.
No, that
That's
was
Charlotte Speedway,
Charlotte. So,
Oh, no, Charlotte, was it? Okay. Check it out.
Formula One also this weekend, Friday, July 19th. Things kick off at 7:30 a.m. Eastern Time on ESPNU for Free Practice 1, followed by Free Practice 2 at 11 a.m. on ESPNU. Saturday, July 20th, FP3 is at 6:30 a.m. Eastern on ESPN2, followed by qualifying at 10 a.m. on ESPN2. And the race, everyone, Sunday, July 21st at 9 a.m. Eastern on ESPN. It's in the game.
It's what, yep, that's their famous, that's it. That's the one.
But that's what's happening this weekend. What's happening in the past, Danny, on this day?
In the past, lots of things happened in the past. Lots of scary things and also some things that aren't scary. Let's find out what happened on this day in July 18th in the past. A big crowd at the British Grand Prix at Brands Hatch went home happy today in 1976 after seeing Playboy Brit racer James Hunt take victory from McLaren. But all was not as it seemed. At the start of the race, Ferrari teammates Niki Lauda and Clay Regazzoni touched and Regazzoni spun. Hunt hit Regazzoni and was launched into the air, damaging his car when he landed. The race was red flagged and restarted, and Hunt took to the spare car. He duly won, but Ferrari protested the result, and in September, Hunt was stripped of the win. Second place man Lauda inherited the win, but it was not enough to stop Hunt taking the title by just 1 point away from Lauda. Spoilers.
Wow.
Hunt won 3 more races in 1977, but they would be McLaren's last for some years. Today in 1981, the team ended their drought when John Watson won the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. It was the first win for the team since Ron Dennis took control. There you go.
All right. And everyone lived happily.
Everyone, exactly. Yeah, James Hunt lived happily ever. Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Niki Lauda.
Danny, final thoughts ahead of the Hungaroring?
Ermagerd. I'm excited to watch it. I'll be getting over a very long flight, so that is my sort of I suspect my weekend is going to. Also, my wife and kid are still on like the east coast of the US, boiling with Rob. For much of next week. So I'm going to be home alone for the first time in like a long time on a weekend. So much like
Summer
Kevin McAllister, I'm going to say, I know, right, man? I'm gonna just arm the house and no one can come in, and I'm gonna watch Formula 1, Formula 2, Formula 3, the whole shebang. I'm just gonna enjoy it up. There's a lot of racing this weekend, and I'm gonna be watching a lot of it.
Nice. Rob, final thoughts?
Yeah, just I don't feel like Hungary is become a really variable race, right? Like there was a period there where like I don't know what people are saying about it's like, Monaco without the city streets and everything. And last couple of years it has been pretty Monaco-esque in terms of overall overtaking potential. So I'm hoping that the 2024 F1 like reversion to awesome form continues here, and that even Hungary can't sort of send us back to the more deterministic vibe of earlier in the season.
I also,
All right, well,
now that you mention it, this was where Ocon won his race as well, isn't it? When I was going through all the years of interesting races, that was in 2021, I think, or maybe I'm wrong, and I'll edit this out of the podcast.
I think this is where he won, though. I just don't know what year.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, if you'd like to support the show and get access to all of our bonus episodes, the ad-free version of the podcast, and the official Shift F1 Discord, you can do so over at patreon.com/ShiftF1. Have a good race weekend, everyone. We will see you all next week.
Nyum.